Welcome everyone. My name is Catherine Ainsworth. I'm the CEO of Pony Club Australia, and welcome to this in our series of webinars we're running for people around the country. We're running this in webinar format, so you'll see that there's the Q&A function. And so for questions that you would like to be answered, if you can put them in the Q&A box, and we'll get to all of those at the end. So welcome to our presenters tonight. Our presenters are Michaela McDonald, who's team leader of Equine at GowGates. GowGates being the insurance broker for Pony Club Australia and have been for many years. Michaela brings an impressive and well-rounded insurance experience, which includes 9 years of complex risk and corporate insurance experience. And Michaela is a relatively new appointee to GowGates and is now leader of the Equine team and looking forward to working with the Pony Club account. Also on the line we have Brad Kelly, who's the divisional manager at GowGates, and Brad's worked in the insurance industry for 21 years, 14 of those years at GowGates. And Brad manages a number of teams, including the Equine team. So Brad has an extensive background then in formulating risk management and risk placement strategies for lots and lots of industries and occupations, and certainly supports the Equine and other teams in GowGates. So Michaela's going to be the one who will be taking the bulk of the program tonight. So I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Hi all. Looking forward to working with you all going forward. Catherine, I just need to be able to share my screen, saying that it's been disabled. There we go.
Try that now.
There we go. So today we will be taking you all through what is Pony Club Australia's program, what is liability insurance, group accident insurance, some claims examples just to help you understand how the insurance can work for you, and what other insurances that we can provide for the Pony Club Association family. So GowGates have been specialising in equine and bloodstock insurance for over 50 years. We have over 100 employees in Australia across 4 offices and 3 states. So we cover most of Eastern Victoria. We will eventually get to Western Australia, hopefully one of these days soon, but we're slowly making our way across. We can also adopt bespoke, tailored approach of insurances based upon our trust and understanding and the depth of our industry experience. We understand that the equine industry is very complex, but you can count on us to be able to understand your risk and the activities that you partake. So what is the Pony Club program? You've got a public liability policy, which is up to 20 million any one occurrence. And then there is the group personal accident with a death capital benefit of 200,000, your loss of income, so 85% of your salary up to 700, and for 104 weeks. So who's covered underneath the Pony Club program? It is the directors and officers, the employees, the office bearers. You've got your committee members, along with your medical officers, your volunteer workers, your members, coaches, both your coaches, which are PCA level 1 and just registered Pony Club coaches. So the 20 million includes damages awarded and legal costs for defences. Under the clubs and committee members, you're covered for when you're organising and conducting approved activities according to Pony Club rules. And you're also where you're liable for causing bodily injury or property damage to a third party, where they are liable for causing, oh, sorry, I've just repeated myself, to a third party. So this is also in addition to providing activities for fundraising and administration duties and your general meetings. For your members, this is your members for your financial writing, Pony Club members, so 24/7 cover for the above, while involved in recreational, non-income earning equestrian activities. You've also got cover for your registered day members while they are attending or participating in your Pony Club approved events and activities. And then lastly, for your coaches, so whilst your coaches are members of the Pony Club Australia or on behalf of the Pony Club at approved events and activities. What is liability insurance? So liability insurance is there to protect you against financial loss if your actions or the actions of your staff, your volunteers, horses, or your negligence of the conditions of your grounds, your property, that is found to cause damage to people or property. Even if you're not found legally liable, you may still incur legal fees in order to defend yourself. If you're found legally liable to pay damages, you will be ordered to pay these, regardless of whether you have insurance or not. But for your liability policy to respond, there must be an event to occur and you are found negligible. And if the event does occur, it's in your best to notify Pony Club Australia or GowGates, or both, of the event, and do not assume responsibility until we've been able to help you through the event. So you've got, underneath the public liability, you've got personal injury. So your personal injury is when there's been a physical injury, an illness, a disease, emotional distress. So this can happen from when you're holding an event and there's been uneven grounds in the arena, which has caused a horse to fall. Someone walking along and they've slipped and fall on a slippery surface, uneven grounds. This is where your public liability policy will help you with personal injury. Third-party property damage. So this is for the physical loss, destruction or damage to a tangible property. So if a horse has escaped a yard and they've then kicked a car, this will help cover for those damages of the third party. Or if you've got a gate to your club grounds, the gate hasn't been secured properly and a member, anyone is driving through the gate and the gate slams into the horse float. This will also help with the cost of the third party damages. Group accident. Group personal accident is the cover for accidental death and loss of salary due to an accident, injury, or sickness while engaging in non-income earning activities. So for clubs, you've got, under the clubs, you've got the directors, your officers, your employees, executive officers, committee members, social committees, your administrators, you've got your medical officers and volunteer workers. So this is to cover for personal injuries sustained whilst engaging in equine activities that are on behalf of Pony Club Australia. For members, financial writing members, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in respect to all hazards which a member is exposed whilst engaging in non-income earning activities. No personal accident cover is for any day members or open competition riders. For non-riding members of Pony Club Australia, there is personal accident injury, but only whilst engaging in Pony Club organised and approved activities, while not mounted. There's also cover under the group personal accident policy for the coaches. You've got, for your PCA level 1 coaches, it's whilst engaging in Pony Club, engaged in coaching your Pony Club members, including your day members, in an event organised by Pony Club Australia. There's also cover for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in respect to all any non-income earning activities. Coaches who are just registered with Pony Club Australia, they have cover for personal injuries whilst engaging in and coaching Pony Club Day members. Medicare Gap. Unfortunately, underneath the Health Insurance Act, the group accident policy is unable to pay for the gap in any medical bill where the rebate has already been covered. This gap can usually be covered underneath your own health insurance if you have health insurance, so it's best to have a look there. But medical expenses where there's been no benefit paid by Medicare is still claimable. So this is your ambulance, physio, dental, crutches, wheelchair, neck brace. Another area that we do want to let you know is that it's a myth that you can't make a claim under multiple insurances for group accident. So if you had 2 policies for group accident and say that your salary was $1,000 a week, and so underneath the Pony Club Australia benefit, it's up to $700. So there's a gap of $300. You're able to either review your other group, your personal accident policy, and to see if they can cover the gap. You just can't claim for $700 or $1,000 on each policy. So it can either be on your Pony Club and your other policy or vice versa. Claims examples. So this is always a little bit of fun. So I've just got a few examples here for just a normal straightforward Pony Club liability policy, a group accident policy, and then also for a non-Pony Club activity. So underneath your liability, as I mentioned before, you've had a horse that has escaped a portable yard. They've caused damage to a portion of the yard and have also damaged 2 vehicles and a horse float. The public liability policy will pick up for the damages that have caused to the third-party vehicles. So the third parties have lodged a claim underneath their motor vehicle policy, and their insurance companies have now sought for reimbursement either from the owner of the horse or from the club member, whoever they are assuming is responsible for these. This is where you notify us and we can help assist on these costs. Group accident policy. You've got a member riding a horse at home. The horse has slipped and she's fallen off, sustained fractured ribs and a fractured pelvis. The policy will reimburse the rider for non-medical expenses, loss of income, the ambulance transport, and hydro pool admission sessions for their rehab. So for non-pony club activities, this is for a liability policy with care and custody control. So there's an equestrian club that also has an additional activity as an adjustment. During the night, a large tree has fallen into the yard with a club member's horse. A horse has been injured by the falling tree and has required extensive veterinary treatment and rehab. Underneath the policy, the additional policy that the equestrian club has taken out, because the adjustment is not covered underneath the pony club policy, the insurance has covered the vet fees for the horse and all rehab fees for the horse to be able to get back to 100%. Additional insurances. So as outlined before, Pony Club Australia will cover for insurances that are agreed by Pony Club, but then there are additional areas where you may want cover for your own activities or for your horses. So horse insurance, that is horse mortality, theft and vet fees. So pretty much it's life insurance for your horse. That we can always help you to get that insurance for you. Public liability for all your non-pony club activities. So that's a riding school, adjustment centre, and any other specialised equine activities. Care and custody control. This is for a cover provides protection against the legal liability incurred as a result of injury or death or financial loss in respect to a horse in your care. It covers the legal expenses in defending such law cases. Farm pack, so farm insurance. This is to cover you, your home and contents, and then with your farm attached to your property. So under these areas is you've got your adjustment, your arena, you've got your stables, your fencing, anything that you can think of that's a part of your equine additional activity, we can tailor the insurance to look after you. And lastly, we have your personal accidents and income protection. This is to cover for all income earning activities, as outlined in underneath the general activities or general accident. It's all in relation to non-income activities. Brad, do you have anything else to add?
I think we might turn our attention to the questions that have been tabled by the group. So first question is, are Pony Club riders covered by insurance when having a lesson outside of Pony Club with an unqualified coach? Now, the way Pony Club's personal accident coverage works, it's 24/7. So anytime a rider's hopping on a horse and is training at a rally or outside of a rally, they have personal accident coverage. So covers there. Going to another third party, an unqualified coach, the unqualified coach will have their own, or should have their own liability. They need to have their own professional indemnity. It's important that if you are going to a third party that you check that they do have the right insurances in place. The reality is when you're dealing with horses and things go wrong, it's important that not only yourself are covered, but the other people that you are working with are covered, because it's often a series of mistakes cause the issue rather than one isolated action. The next question is, where a club has its grounds, and are we as a committee covered for the liability of members using the grounds outside of a specific rally? The question with this is, it depends. So where you're hiring your grounds out for private lessons, technically the club's earning an income that's not strictly part of your normal pony club activities, and there'd be an argument that you should seek your standalone liability, which we do for many clubs around the country. If it was a case of a member was just using the grounds in an unofficial capacity and they had an issue, the club itself would certainly be covered to defend an action from that member if they were to become injured. So again, it just depends on the circumstances as to if they have been granted access or if they're paying for access and what occurred there. Essentially, the liability covers the activities of what the actual club's doing. So probably need a little bit more detail on that one before we can answer it definitively. Next one, are coaches covered for providing one-on-one lessons to rider members where the member is paying a smaller amount for the lesson? Again, if this sets out of the pony club's membership and fees, it's effectively a small business sitting on the side. It's important that if that business is earning income, that they have their appropriate insurances in place. Again, coaches who do want to have a separate program, it's a relatively inexpensive cover. We're looking at about $600-700. So important to consider if you are looking to do activities outside of the remit of the pony club. Next one, just clarifying that a paid coach for pony club at a pony club event, what is the coach covered for? So because your pony club event and it's paid, you're certainly covered for the public liability attached with what you're providing, the errors and omissions, so your professional indemnity because you're providing advice to the member as far as that coaching activity, and then that's basically it. When what's the next one? If you're a paid L1 instructor, what does this cover? It only mentions unpaid. If the question is directed within the personal accident space, the intention of the personal accident space is really about having a supplementary benefit around income for your non-core activities. So if you're a coach, that's your activity, distinctly different from someone whose day job is an office worker who comes and does a little bit of pony club on the side on the weekend and gets injured. So a similar distinction from where we have open competition professional riders who wouldn't be covered by the income part of the personal accident program. Catherine, do you have any questions for Michaela or myself?
There's, if you scroll down, there's another one. Do we have a list of commonly asked questions? We'll perhaps work on that. I think we understand the common ones, which are often about coaching and cover for coaches.
Yeah.
But here's one. Yeah, go on, Brad.
Just before we dive into that, Pony Club Australia has actually got a very good website, which I'd encourage you guys to have a look at. It walks through a couple of a lot of the frequently asked questions, to be honest. And we probably we'll send a link around for everyone to have a look at that after this as well, because I'd encourage you guys to jump on, because it goes through a little bit more detail around how Medicare works and the various different elements. So the next one was following on from the SIEC investigation. Are any of the follow-on issues if a club knows that there is issue with a footing in a riding area or arena? Yeah, so this isn't just limited to that investigation. If you go to the recent High Court decision with the TAP matter, where there was a horrendous injury for a camp drafter on a ground that was deemed unfit to continue the event. Now, that particular incident was a little bit unique in the sense that there was a number of people that had been injured earlier in the day, and it was deemed that they should have abandoned the event. It's an ongoing risk management issue for all people in any sport that has horses. The surface is critical to make sure, safety of both the rider and the horse. It's important that all of us are proactive in it, and not to be too cautious in the sense of you're stopping an event not because you're trying to be over sensitive to these issues. The reality is you're stopping it because you don't want to see a horse go down and you don't want to see a rider have a major injury. It's really important that we all stay on top of that. Claims, horrendous as they are, affect the ability for the group to get insurance. It's really important that we avoid the largest issues, and the largest issues do come around from the surface, because it is obviously what makes it difficult for a horse to stay up. To the next question: to what extent do accident reports submitted to PCA affect insurance costs? There's no impact if you notify an incident. If anything, you'll find notifying incident is demonstrating to the insurers that you understand what's going on. I encourage people to notify, because you tend to find when you have significant events, they don't make it to court to 4 or 5 years later. Everyone's memory gets a little bit hazy. People remember things slightly different. Documenting what's happened at the time is important, and it will help you to defend a matter when you have done the right thing and it's just an unfortunate event. So I encourage you guys to always submit incidents, always notify potential issues, even if you think nothing will come from it. That physical documentation at the time is helpful. It certainly helps lawyers defend you guys in the long term. If the lawyers are able to defend the organisation, ultimately that leads to lower premiums than if we have poor defence and we're not able to defend you. So please document any incidents and make sure that they're lodged with the appropriate parties. Next one: how will the adherence to PCA's minimum medical standards affect the insurance response to an accident? So insurance is secondary. Ultimately, the medical standards aren't there about your insurance program. They're actually there about rider safety. Insurance is really about what happens after the event in terms of the financial loss that someone might suffer from the negligence of a third party. The personal accident program is deliberately in there as a no-fault system. So if someone just falls off a horse, they've got some coverage. They don't need to be able to prove that a third party did something wrong. The medical standards, we encourage you guys to comply with it, because they are being designed and guided with trying to make your sport as safe as possible. I know it can be a little frustrating sometimes, especially when people are in more remote areas, but these haven't just come out of let's make things frustrating. It's really about how do we provide the safest environment for our riders and horses, so that we don't end up with a horrific injury. And if there is an injury, that they get the appropriate medical treatment as soon as possible, which will limit the ongoing impact. And if you limit the ongoing impact, ultimately there's a smaller claim. The wet weather this year is affecting ground surfaces, and when they're dry, muddy, uneven surfaces may be hidden by long grass and inadvertently cause horses to lose footings. That's yes, a factor. Ultimately, you've just got to do your best to try to mitigate that, as far as making sure that the ground is prepared to the best possible ability. Bearing in mind, insurance isn't the thing that's going to make everyone's grounds to Olympic standards and as wonderful as walking out of the MCG. Understanding that that's where a large amount of injuries comes from is where people need to be mindful and need to try to mitigate that. Now, again, that's about getting out and physically inspecting your grounds and making sure that it is safe to be on those grounds. And if it's not, to not put your members and horses in danger. The next one, how much are you concerned by adherence to the breakaway cup standards? Now, that's a question I don't quite understand, to be honest.
It's about the standards for construction of jumps and what is now expected to be the standard for that, so that they are less risk to riders.
Okay. Now, this is, as an insurance guy, I'll profess that I'm not with all the terminology around how a jump is constructed or how it's made safer for both the rider and horse. Obviously, a breakaway, I imagine, is about a jump collapsing when the horse doesn't make it. Ultimately, anything that lessens the potential injury to a horse and the rider is going to be supported by insurers. We don't have it written into the program in terms of explicitly, nor would you want it. Because if it was explicitly written in there, if one of the volunteers was to set something up slightly incorrectly, you wouldn't want a policy to be voided. Now, as a group, similar to some of the other standards that PCA is looking to implement, it is important to try to adhere to the standard. Standards are there for a reason. They're not just dreamt up to make life a little bit difficult. Ultimately, the aims are the same. It's all about safety of rider and horse.
I've got a question. So this is about the care, custody and control. And it's, for example, when a pony club might be bringing in cattle for use in an event. What should they be, if they're embarking on a new activity like that, what should they do?
Anything that they're doing outside the norm, or they're not sure about, or it feels a little bit different, they should be talking to PCA to start with about what they're doing and whether that's normal part of pony club activities. If it's something that's not standard for Pony Club Australia, we've got two choices. If Pony Club Australia can endorse it and say, yes, that's standard activity, and we will then endorse the group program. If it's a case of an activity that Pony Club Australia is not comfortable and it's getting out of the charter of what Pony Club's all about, and it's an activity the club still would like to undertake, they can certainly talk to us directly and we can set up some alternative insurance. We do a number of Western disciplines, so we're certainly quite familiar with the camp drafting and some of the other equine groups that do work with cattle. Doesn't pose a huge issue for us, other than what sort of cover you want for the cattle. So bear in mind that the care, custody, control is not a mortality policy for cattle. So if you have cattle that are in your possession, and they die because they've got an underlying illness, or they die because you've taken reasonable steps. So, for example, a storm was coming, you took reasonable steps to secure them, and then in the middle of the storm, one of them got hit by lightning. As freaky as that could be, you're not liable for it because you took reasonable steps. Distinctly different from, I introduced some feed to the cattle, and I inadvertently managed to poison them because there was something in the feed. Now, I've fed them, so therefore I've created a liability for the loss of that cattle. So again, it depends how long you're having the cattle, whether you're looking after it a short time or a long time, whether you want full mortality cover for them, or you're comfortable just with a limited care, custody, control. But again,
thank you. There's another question there now. If a club engages an unregistered, uninsured but paid person to coach, and there is a serious accident or a fatality, is the committee who engaged the coach liable or the coach liable?
You'll actually find that it'll be a combination. So ultimately, if it's a horrendous injury, lawyers will sue everyone involved. So the uninsured coach will get sued, the club will get sued, PCA will get sued, and then what happens is everyone figures it out. The challenge there is if you've got someone who's uninsured, the courts don't always proportion things the way someone would expect. So it's important if you are engaging with third parties that you check that they have insurance, because if they don't, you may end up having a disproportionate liability applied to yourself. So again, it comes back to what was the circumstances that caused the injury or the fatality, as to how they portion liability. At the very least, there would be cover for PCA and the club. However, we wouldn't encourage you to engage with unregistered or uninsured coaches or people to be at your rallies, because ultimately that's not the right way to deal with things. If they are of reputable standard, it's not difficult for them to get insurance. It's also important that if someone else is at fault, that they wear the burden of that claim and it doesn't sit on your membership and ultimately your membership fees. Next one, can you update and provide an impact of the redress scheme on sporting clubs and associations? Molestation cover is becoming more and more difficult to get from traditional insurers because of what's happened. The redress schemes is a poor man's substitute for a lot of that. In lots of ways, pony clubs escaped many of those issues, which is great. We're still able to have some cover for that, and knock on wood, we've not really had incidents. But it's becoming more and more difficult. It is important that people follow protocols. It's important that people stay up to date with the standard, because the standard will continue to change. And it's important that adults follow the rules, not just to protect the kids, but to protect themselves. Often people don't understand the challenges when accusations are made. If they've not followed the rules, you're leaving yourself exposed unnecessarily. Next question, what are the most common and most expensive pony club claims you received in the last 3 years? The most common, most expensive claim is when you have a fatality on a personal accident program, is typically what you see, where someone's had a horrendous injury and it's a full capital benefit payout. Pony Club does enjoy some of the high benefits of any sort of riding association going around. But the challenge there is it does put pressure on members, because ultimately the insurer is funding that via your membership. Other claims are varied as far as where they spike. Third-party liability claims tend to be your biggest potential for exposure. And when I say potential, it's really about that catastrophic injury where someone sues, similar to Tap Matter, which was $6.2 million claim, and successfully manages to overturn the Dangerous Activity Act. But again, they're not frequent, that sort of size claims, but they are an area of concern. Insurers need to put money away for substantial claims because it does have a possibility of occurring. And even if you've got a lot of members who are paying a small amount of money, it takes a long time to substantiate that sort of cash. So it can be a challenge for not just for the association, but for the insurers to stomach significant claims.
Sorry, just to clarify, the TAP matter was the camp drafting one where the competition was continued on a ground that had been judged to be not fit for purpose anymore.
Correct. And there was injuries earlier in the day. There was lack of notification to the rider that she should have dismounted and checked the ground herself, and some issues around how she was advised of the ground was potentially unsafe. Horrible injury, but it's certainly a learning from anyone involved in equine. If there are a number of injuries, or you're getting more than one injury, you need to stop and consider what you're doing. You need to consider, was that one off, or are we seeing a pattern here? If we're seeing a pattern, we need to think seriously about what we're doing. I mean, I think the lawyers are quite clear. If it was fair, if she was the first injury of the day, it may not have been a successful court case.
What is a social member covered for, and is it 24/7? So a social member is not a riding member. So I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, so social members are basically covered when they're at an event for public liability, effectively. Because you're not getting on a horse, you still have an exposure if you accidentally trip someone over and they fall over and hurt themselves. The cover's only really limited to the actual pony club rallies. Your own personal liability would be covered by your home and contents and or your farm insurance. Sort of distinctly different. So when you're only at an event is when we talk about the cover for a social member.
What about when a social member's hit by a horse that's loose?
Yeah,
Again,
it's the person. So, for example, if I was to be hit by one of the horses tomorrow, it's not about whether I have cover. It's about the owner of the horse has cover.
Mm-hmm.
So, if the owner of the horse was a PCA member and it was they had an issue, if the owner of the horse wasn't a PCA member, it would fall on their own liability insurance. Now, people need to watch out when they've got farm insurance. A large number of the farm insurers, including one of the bigger direct insurers, has an equine exclusion on the public liability section. So if you have a farm policy and you're with one of the major direct insurers, you need to look at that section. If you're not sure, send it to the team at GowGates. We will certainly read it for you and tell you if there is an issue there. A number of years ago, one of the larger farm insurers had an issue with a horse on a property, not an equine-focused property, just a horse. Like everyone had, some people just have horses as a pet. Caused an injury to a third party, and insurers just ran away from it. So it's important that if you do have farm or other insurances, that you have the appropriate cover.
I think the next question is the same. So what if the social member is coaching? So they're a volunteer and they're a volunteer coach, or the committee member. Well, I think that's what you've just said about if they are injured, then it would go on the liability insurance of the person who had the horse.
Correct. Or if the PCA rally caused the issue and that injured the coaching musterer or the committee member, then the public liability is there for a reason. And it's the actions of the third party is what you got to think about, is how public liability works. So they're dual triggers. You need to be liable. There needs to be personal injury or property damage. If you don't have the liable part and someone's unfortunate, they just have an accident, that's where you need to have your own personal accident, whether you're a riding member, or personal accident or income protection as a normal person who's just, if you go down to the shops and you fall over, you need cover for that in your own capacity.
So that's where they can prove liability.
Correct. So you have to be able to substantiate that someone else did something wrong. Just because some unfortunate thing happened, it's about whether the third party acted reasonably and whether they've taken appropriate steps to avoid it. So coming back to Michaela's earlier issue of you've got a number of horses in a penned area and for some reason someone accidentally opens the gate. Now that's someone creating a negligence because they accidentally left the gate open. Distinctly different from you've taken all reasonable steps, but the gate fails in terms of it opens. And if no one can point to the liability of why it failed, then it becomes an argument for lawyers to say, was it reasonable or unreasonable for that failure of the gate? And then potentially a liability case against the manufacturer of the gate or the fencing or the penning area. So it really depends on the minute detail, but the way the liability policies work is they protect you in your first instance. So it pays lawyers to determine whether you are liable or not before it gets anywhere near a court.
Okay, I think that's the end of the questions. So we will thank everyone for their attendance, and thank you again to Michaela and Brad. The slide at the end of the presentation had Michaela's contact details. Do you want to pop that up again for contacts before we finish off?
Excellent.
Or you can send an email to the info@ponyclubaustralia.com.au email address.
Fantastic. And I'd encourage everyone to jump on and have a look at the PCA Insurance website. It is well worth it.
So I put that in the chat window, so hopefully people can read that. Otherwise, you can just Google Pony Club GowGates and you'll find it. So here are the contact details then for the equine team at GowGates and for Michaela herself.
Yeah, so email address is equine@GowGates, GOWGATES.com.au.
Okay, well, thank you everyone again for your attendance, and thank you again to our presenters.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for taking the time, guys, to log on.
Thank you.
Thanks all.